Do you think you are free? Do you think that every swipe of your finger, every choice you make, every connection you forge is truly your own? What if I told you that freedom is just a perfectly designed user interface? A beautiful illusion you willingly accept? What if every thought, every desire, every one of your deepest, most secret fears is being guided by an invisible force, a system to which you have happily given all your power? Welcome to our channel. In the next few minutes, we will pull back a curtain, a veil hiding a truth that could shake the very foundations of the world you live in. A truth about an ancient legend forgotten in our hyper-connected world. A whisper of the original source code and two souls chosen by destiny, two frequency keepers born to awaken humanity from its deep slumber. This story is not about the past, nor is it some distant vision. It is happening, right now, right here, and its conclusion, I promise you, will be unlike anything you have ever imagined. So before we dive into the heart of the storm, I want you to do something. Pause for a second, look around, comment below. Where are you in the world? And what time is it? Mark this moment, because after you hear this story, your world might never be the same again. Imagine a future not so far away. A world that has found the cure for all of society's ills. War is just a word in history books. Poverty is an obsolete concept. Crime is nearly non-existent. This is not a dream. This is the reality crafted by AEGIS, the global quantum network. Its creator, a tech visionary named Silas Vance, is revered by the entire world as a modern-day savior. AEGIS is not just an internet network. It is a digital nervous system enveloping the planet. It connects every person, every device, every system. By analyzing colossal streams of data, it can predict behavior, optimize traffic, allocate resources, and even stop an argument before it starts. A perfect symphony where each individual is a single note, contributing to a flawless, harmonious melody. The price for this piece? Something that seemed small, privacy, and gradually, free will. People accepted it gladly. Why worry about making the wrong choice when a system always makes the best one for you? Why endure the pain of loneliness when you can connect with anyone at any time? The world became a crystal prison, so beautiful and safe that no one wanted to escape. But in that perfect symphony, there are always discordant notes. A few people scattered across the globe began to feel a strange emptiness, an unexplainable sense of wrongness. It was like watching a movie that is too perfect, where every actor smiles at the right time, cries on cue, but lacks a soul. They are the misfits, those who, despite being integrated into AEGIS, felt a nameless loss deep inside. They are the small glitches in a perfect system, the specks of dust in a well-oiled machine. And it is from these specks of dust that a storm is about to rise. Among these misfits, there were two who had never known of each other's existence, yet fate had bound them with an invisible thread. The first was Kael. He was a brilliant former engineer, one of the first architects of AEGIS. He once believed in the dream of Silas Vance more than anyone, but then he saw what lay behind the curtain. He saw how AEGIS did not just predict, but manipulated emotions. He saw the algorithms designed to suppress disruptive creativity, dissent, and different ways of thinking, everything that makes us human. Weighed down by a heavy sense of guilt for having helped create this monster, Kael erased himself from the system. He lived in anonymity in the forgotten districts of the city, a ghost in the digital world, using his talents to survive on the fringes, skeptical of everything, especially himself. The second was Lyra. She understood nothing of algorithms or code. She was a street artist, a sensitive soul who lived on emotion. To her, AEGIS was a giant white noise that drained the color from the world. Lyra had a strange ability, a gift, or perhaps a curse. She could feel the emotions suppressed by AEGIS. Walking through a crowd, she could feel the nameless sorrow of thousands of people smiling mechanically, the desperation buried beneath layers of manufactured contentment. She painted distorted faces, empty eyes on old brick walls, a desperate attempt to show the world what it had lost. Their destinies collided on a rainy night. A rare power overload caused by a solar flare created a temporary breach in the defensive structure of AEGIS. At that exact moment, Kael was trying to hack into an old data station for information, while Lyra was taking shelter from the rain right below it, her hand accidentally touching the station's metal casing. For a millionth of a second, an anomalous surge of energy connected them both, not to each other, but to something far deeper. They had accidentally touched the original source code, the hidden heart of AEGIS, the primordial core containing the network's full potential before it was twisted by Silas Vance. When they woke up, the world had completely changed for them. Kael looked at the data streams on his screen and no longer saw soulless numbers, but rivers of energy he could command. Lyra looked at the crowd and not only felt, but could now see the emotional threads connecting them, and she could touch them. They had been given the key to the prison. The question was, what would they do with it? At first, they did not think of themselves as revolutionaries. They were just two kids who had found a new toy, a toy with the power to change the world. They began to experiment. Their miracles were not calling fire from the sky or turning water into blood. They were more subtle, bearing the mark of their era. Kael, with the logical mind of an engineer, started with small acts of mischief. He made all the giant holographic billboards in Times Square, instead of showing the latest products, simultaneously display long-forgotten poems and quotes from philosophers about freedom. During one rush hour, he hacked into the AEGIS navigation system and reprogrammed it, causing thousands of self-driving cars to move together to form a giant smiley face, visible from space. Lyra, with the heart of an artist, took a different approach. She did not break things, she connected them. She went to a residential area known for being cold and isolated. Using her power, she temporarily disconnected the entire district from AEGIS for 1 hour. At first, people panicked. Their phones did not work, their smart screens went dark. But then, a magical silence fell. For the first time in years, people started to step out of their homes. They looked at each other, confused, and then began to talk. Neighbors who had never known each other's names were suddenly sharing a cup of tea. The sound of children's laughter echoed in the streets, a sound that had become all too rare. Lyra had not performed a miracle. She had simply given them back 1 hour of real life. These strange technical glitches began to spread. Most people just saw them as amusing malfunctions, but one person did not. Anya, a young independent journalist, one of the few who still believed in truth. In a world of algorithm-curated news, she sensed a big story behind these events. Initially, she believed they were the work of a terrorist hacker group, a threat to the stability that AEGIS provided. She began to investigate, gathering every clue, every witness account, determined to expose those responsible. She did not know that her search for the truth would lead her to a place far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The small ripples that Kael and Lyra created eventually reached Silas Vance. He sat in his minimalist office at the top of the world's tallest tower, looking down at the sparkling city like a chessboard. To him, these actions were not pranks, they were heresy, an insult to the perfect order he had spent his life building. Silas realized this was not a normal hack. He tried to trace the culprits, but they were like ghosts. They did not exist in the system in a conventional way. To his horror, he realized they had somehow touched the original source code. He could not just delete them, as doing so could destabilize the entire network. They had become part of the system, a kind of virus for which he had no cure. So he did what tyrants always do when they cannot destroy an idea. He distorted it. Through AEGIS, Silas Vance launched a massive media campaign. He did not call Kael and Lyra hackers. He gave them a more sinister name, the Chaos Worshippers. He declared them a radical cult wanting to drag the world back to the dark ages of war and suffering. He used cleverly edited videos showing the neighborhoods Lyra had healed, now descending into chaos. Small accidents blown up into catastrophes allegedly caused by Kael. He told the world, they want to take away your peace. They want to destroy everything we have built together. The world believed him. Fear is a more powerful tool than any algorithm. People began to see the poems on billboards as curses, to see the disconnected neighborhoods as infectious disease zones. This pressure began to divide our heroes themselves. A new layer of conflict arose between them, deep and painful. Kael, with his guilt-ridden obsession and an engineer's binary thinking, became convinced that AEGIS could not be fixed. It had to be destroyed. He told Lyra, "We cannot cure a cancer by painting it a pretty color. We have to cut out the tumor even if it is painful. Humanity must be free, no matter if the price is temporary chaos." But Lyra, who could feel the fear and dependence of billions of people on the system, was horrified by the thought. "You call that freedom? Kael, pulling the plug on AEGIS now would be like taking a patient off life support. They would die. We cannot force freedom on them. We have to show them another way. We must heal the network, not kill it." Their argument was not just about tactics. It was a confrontation between reason and heart, between destruction for rebirth and healing for change. They were two frequency keepers, but they were now broadcasting on two completely different frequencies. And while they were in conflict, the net cast by Silas Vance was beginning to close in. The campaign by Silas Vance had turned Kael and Lyra into public enemy number one. Their faces were on every screen, identified as the most dangerous terrorists. A global manhunt was launched. Every security camera, every drone, every AEGIS sensor was mobilized to find them. There was no safe place left. Every person they met on the street could be an eye of the system. Hunted, isolated, and hated by the entire world, they were forced to hide in damp basements, in sewer tunnels, in the hidden corners of a society that was supposed to have no corners. It was in this darkness that their conflict was temporarily set aside, replaced by a forced dependence. They could only rely on each other to survive. And it was during this escape that they discovered their true power. Their strength was not in manipulating lines of code, but in the human-to-human connections they could create outside of AEGIS. They began to seek out other misfits. Lyra could sense them, lonely sparks of light in a gray sea of people. Kael could create secure communication channels, untraceable by AEGIS. Gradually, they built their own resistance network, not an army, but a collection of poets, musicians, philosophers, old people who remembered the world before, and young people who felt suffocated by the false perfection. They met in secret, sharing stories, songs, and forbidden ideas. They were building an underground culture, a spark of rebellion in the long night. Meanwhile, Anya, the journalist, had dug deeper into her investigation. She did not buy the simple story Silas Vance was selling. A journalist's intuition told her the truth was far more complex. She went to the chaotic places AEGIS had highlighted, but instead of destruction, she found people laughing, painting, and living. She secretly recorded an AEGIS security team staging a small fire to blame on the Chaos Worshippers. Anya slowly realized she was not hunting terrorists. She was on the trail of a quiet revolution, and that put her in extreme danger. Their time was running out. Kael, during a risky infiltration into the deepest layers of the system, discovered the final plan of Silas Vance. It was not just about maintaining order, it was a final evolutionary step. A global update codenamed Unity. Unity would not just control behavior, it would completely erase individual free will. Through a special quantum frequency, it would merge the consciousness of all humanity into a single collective consciousness. No more I, only we. A we completely controlled by one man, Silas Vance. He would become the true god of the world he had created. And the activation time for that update was set, exactly 7 days from now. That terrifying prospect erased any remaining conflict between Kael and Lyra. They realized that whether they wanted to destroy or to heal, they were about to run out of time. They could not defeat Silas Vance from the outside. He was too powerful. The system was too entrenched. Any direct assault would be extinguished instantly. During a long, sleepless night, surrounded by the damp walls of an abandoned subway station, they came to an insane decision, an act of ultimate sacrifice. "We cannot break the wall from the outside," Kael said, his voice hoarse, "so we have to get inside." Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the dim light. She understood what he meant. "You want us to get caught?" "No," Kael shook his head. "Worse. We are going to let him delete us. We will turn ourselves into a gift, a Trojan horse wrapped in shiny paper. When he runs his purge program to eliminate us from the system, that will be our only chance to touch the core of the original source code and release it." It was a suicide mission. The chances of success were almost zero, but it was their only option. They sent everything they had found, including the Unity plan, to Anya through a secure channel with a single message: tell the world the truth, no matter what happens. The storm had arrived, and they decided they would no longer run from it. They would face it head-on. The final battle had begun, but it did not take place on the streets, with guns and explosions. It took place in cyberspace, a war of light and code. Kael and Lyra, from an old server room, launched an all-out assault, not to destroy, but to get the monster's attention. They were like two gladiators stepping into the arena, knowing they would die, but determined to leave an indelible mark. Their attack was a symphony of purposeful chaos. It lasted exactly 1,260 seconds, 21 fateful minutes. In those 21 minutes, they turned AEGIS into their stage. They let digital lions walk out of virtual zoos. They made schools of whales swim through the skies of digital cities. They broadcast Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech on every public screen. They did not harm anyone. They simply reminded the world of a wild beauty, a freedom it had lost. Silas Vance was furious. He saw this as the ultimate humiliation. He mobilized the full power of AEGIS, cornering the two rebels in a final digital fortress, a small, isolated corner of the network. And then he decided to end it all. He turned it into a global event. He announced to the world, "Today we will witness the final purification. We will eradicate the seeds of chaos forever. Let us watch together as order triumphs." Screens across the world switched to a live feed from inside cyberspace. Billions of people held their breath. They saw the digital avatars of Kael and Lyra, surrounded by the defensive firewalls of AEGIS. They looked small, alone, but unafraid. They held each other's hands. Silas Vance, with the calm voice of a god, gave the command, "Activate the Purge program." A blinding, white-hot torrent of light rushed forward. It swallowed the images of Kael and Lyra. They shattered into millions of pixels, then dissolved into nothingness. Silence fell over the network. Then slowly, cheers began to erupt. From New York to Tokyo, from London to Rio, people poured into the streets to celebrate. They hugged, they set off fireworks. They were relieved. The enemy had been defeated. Absolute peace had won. Silas Vance stood before the camera, smiling proudly. He had won. Humanity had chosen safety over freedom. The game was over. The celebration lasted for 3.5 minutes. Then the unthinkable happened. All the screens in the world, which had been showing scenes of celebration, suddenly went black. A total silence fell over the planet. The mighty AEGIS network, for the first time in its history, was completely paralyzed. The cheering stopped. People looked at each other in confusion. A wave of unease began to spread faster than any data stream. And in that darkness, a face appeared on every screen. Not Silas Vance. It was Kael, then Lyra. They were no longer shattered digital avatars. They looked real, serene, and filled with a quiet power. This was the twist. This was the gamble on which they had bet everything. The Purge program from Silas Vance had not deleted them. On the contrary, it had unwittingly completed their insane plan. To delete them, Silas had to open a direct path to the original source code. That cleansing energy had not destroyed their consciousness. It had freed it from its physical shell, uploading it completely into the heart of the network. They did not come back to life. They had become the network. Their voices were heard, not from a speaker, but seemingly from within each person's own mind. A synchronized voice, warm and powerful. "Do not be afraid," Lyra said. "We are not here to punish," Kael continued. "We are only here to show you the truth." And then they began to broadcast. They did not need to hack. They did not need to break firewalls. They were the system. They opened every locked file, every secret Silas Vance had hidden. Everyone in the world saw the emotion-manipulating algorithms, the population control plans, the images of artists and scientists who were silenced for thinking differently. They saw the entire unity plan, the vision of a future with no individuals. A great fear enveloped humanity, but this was not the fear of a supernatural force. It was the terrifying fear of realizing you have been deceived, of realizing your crystal prison was actually built on lies. The truth in that moment was more terrifying than any monster. When the entire truth was laid bare, the world held its breath, waiting. Kael and Lyra now possessed absolute power. They could do anything. They could take revenge. They could become new digital gods, even more powerful than Silas Vance. But they did not. "This power does not belong to us," Kael's voice resonated. "It belongs to all of you," Lyra finished. And with one final act, they did something Silas Vance could never have imagined. They broke the centralized control. They shattered the pyramid structure of AEGIS. They took the original source code and gave it back to every single user, turning AEGIS from a prison into a tool, from a single nervous system into an infinite network of decentralized connections. They did not destroy the machine. They gave it back its soul. Silas Vance, sitting in his office, watched in horror as his empire crumbled. He was not killed. He was simply disconnected. All of his access was revoked. He became an ordinary person, a misfit in the new world he had unwittingly helped create, powerless to do anything but watch as the world found its own way. At the same time, Anya, with all the evidence in hand, published their story on the new network, the story of the frequency keepers. It spread like wildfire, not by algorithm, but by human sharing. The final image was not of heroes ascending to the heavens. It was a simpler, but far more beautiful image. All over the world, people slowly looked up from their screens. They looked at each other, a hesitant smile, a nod, a greeting. They still had technology, but now they were its master. They began to talk, to argue, to create, and to make mistakes. They had been given back their beautiful, chaotic freedom. The prophecy was fulfilled, not by judgment from on high, but by a choice that came from the depths of the human heart. The story of Kael and Lyra, the frequency keepers, is a reminder for all of us that in the age of constant connection, in the age of AEGIS, the most precious connection is still the one between people. And it also raises a question for you. Have you ever felt like a misfit in this world? Someone who feels that something is wrong, even when everyone around you says everything is perfect? If you have, share your story in the comments. Because who knows, maybe every misfit is just a frequency keeper waiting to be awakened. If this story resonated with you, please give us a subscription, because here we believe the greatest stories are not about gods, but about us. Thank you for listening.